The greatest vaccination story that has never been told. Those who control the past will control the future. The future we are looking at right now is that we are faced with a killer virus that cannot be defeated by any other means than vaccination. So we are told. Vaccination has once again seeped into our culture as being a force for heroic good. The world is now mulling over how punitive it can become to vaccinate us all in a response to the coronavirus. That there is only one way out from a disease that so far has stayed in the range of flu, has a 99.94% survival rate, and an average death rate around the world of 82. Of course, it's the most obvious choice. Vaccination eradicated most of our deadly diseases in the past, saving millions and millions from agonizing suffering and short lives. It is also helping us with infectious diseases all around the world now, so surely it's our best shot of providing the golden fleece most fitting for these times. Or is it? Most healthy people today are totally fine with this virus. In fact, this virus is so weak for the vast majority of people, they actually need a test to see whether they've got it or not. I'm not convinced about the efficacy of a vaccination that has been rushed through in 8 months when the standard time for a fully tested one is 10 to 15 years. But what really concerns me is how punitive my government and others will become to impose their worldview. Are they really going to go for mandatory vaccination, stripping us all of free choice? Or will they resort to a second-tier option of turning people who refuse into second-class citizens with limited freedom and access to all sorts of services? My fears have been stoked for a while now, and I have seen martial law come in and my government turn from a democracy to a dictatorship almost overnight. It should be no secret that I intend to become a conscientious objector. My body, my choice is what I want, not just for myself, but for everybody else too. To help us all make an informed choice, I've decided to look at the past history of vaccinations and see what has brought us to this point. I think you will be enlightened and empowered by what I have found. You may also be shocked and angry of what has happened before and question, why are we trying to use this approach again? But before we jump into vaccinations, I think it is important to bring into light how people lived in the 19th century when infectious disease was rife. Disease, it appears, didn't just come from nowhere. It was largely created by the living conditions of the day. Try leaving some bags of open rubbish outside and a bucket or two of poop and see what comes to visit. Here is a short passage from 1883 to help us cast our mind back. Few who will read these pages have any conception of what these pestilential human rookeries are, where tens of thousands are crowded together amidst horrors which call to mind what we have heard of the middle passage of the slave ship. To get to them you have to penetrate courts reeking with poisonous gases, arising from the accumulation of sewage and refuse scattered in all directions and often flowing beneath your feet. Courts, many of them which the sun never penetrates, which are never visited by a breath of fresh air, and which rarely know the virtues of a drop of cleansing water. You have to ascend rotten staircases, which threaten to give way beneath every step, leaving gaps that imperil the limbs and lives of the unwary. You then have to grope your way along dark and filthy passages, swarming with vermin. Then, if you're not driven back by the intolerable stench, you may gain admittance to the dens in which thousands of beings who belong, as much as you, to the race for whom Christ died, herd together. It was increased commercial trade and travel combined with atrocious hygienic conditions worldwide that brought our ancestors 6 cholera pandemics in the 1800s, first in 1816 and the last in 1926. Other diseases like smallpox, purple fever, scarlet fever, diphtheria, measles, scurvy, whooping cough were all so darn atrocious that for the urban poor in industrialised Victorian England, the average age of life was just 15 to 16 years old. I must confess that while I was researching all this material, I could not help but cry for all those poor souls who had been afflicted with such a treacherous and short life. We in the Western world are all here because of what our ancestors went through and what lessons they passed on to us. Those lessons should never be bandied around as a mere footnote, and so I intend to honour their suffering by bringing their story back to the surface. The story of vaccination began in 1717 when Lady Mary Wortley Montagu returned from the Ottoman Empire with the practice of variolation, which has taken a small amount of material from a human smallpox lesion and scratching it into the skin of another person. But the story really kicks off 79 years later when Edward Jenner took an 8-year-old James Phipps and vaccinated him with cowpox from the hands of a dairymaid. Vaccination was birthed, and it didn't matter greatly if all the details didn't match up. They were going to run with this one as hard as they could. Was it because they sincerely wanted to eradicate all these diseases and this felt like their best shot? Or did it come from a place of superior entitlement from the medical profession that they know what's best for our bodies and lives? It's always a tad extra confusing when the money flows into their pockets as well. The next 100 years of suffering would help to complete the picture. A poem of the time. Try revaccination, it will never hurt you, for revaccination has this one great virtue. Should it injure or kill you whenever you receive it, we all stand prepared to refuse to believe it.